So, I'll show you a lot of images in very brief time. Our practice, my partner Reed Crum and I founded Weisshaar some 10 years ago. Reed has an MIT background. He's a computer scientist originally, studied with John Maid at MIT. I'm more from the practical side. I have a classical design education at the Royal College of Art, worked for Konstantin Gürcic for a couple of years. And then we set up shop together, half in Stockholm, half in Munich. So our practice is just sort of multinational, micron multinational. And our clients are very diverse. We work for very large companies like Audi, PwC, but also for little tiny jewels, even crown jewels like Porzellanmanufaktur Nymphenburg, which is a 260-year-old company with 30 employees.
And a little crown jewel called Prada.
And a little crown jewel called Prada, which is not so little anymore. Exactly. So there's energy companies, car companies, but also design companies, Venini, Murano, glass company, little manufacturers, the whole spectrum. And all of this interests us. We like working for the big guys, and we love working for the small guys. We're going to start small. This year in Milan, this year is just a month ago in April, we presented a new project in Nilofar Gallery in Milan titled Multithread. And Multithread is part of a larger body of work which deals with physics simulation. Physics simulation as in finite elements analysis of three-dimensional objects, meaning we can calculate what happens inside of an object incredibly precisely now. And we can do this in real time because we're so close to singularity that computing power is not the issue anymore. And what we did was to write software, write code that generates structures based on what's happening inside of the structure. And our interest is to analyze the forces acting within a structure and then building the optimal structure with as little fat, as little weight as possible. And in this case, we're lacquering the simulation, the false color simulation of what's happening inside of the object. We're painting that on top of the object. So it becomes both the physical structure of the object, as well as its form, as well as its color, is all driven by analysis of what happens within. And what happens within is all things the eye can't see. So we're painting this on top of the object and making things visible that are otherwise completely hidden to the human eye. So you see where the joints are, you get much more forces acting, you get much more action than in the straight bits. The second project I want to show you is less indie. It's supported by Audi in a very substantial way, and it's our second project for Audi. And we had the pleasure to work with the engineers who designed this race car. And this is the ultimate in lightweight construction. It's carbon fiber, aluminum construction, weighs next to nothing. And these cars regularly win the 24 Hours of Le Mans. I think like 10 times in the last 12 years. And we were very interested in this lightweight construction, Audi Ultra as they call it, which is basically analyzing lightweight construction not based on how light can we possibly get the vehicle, but based on how much energy do we have to invest in order to make it so light, and can we recoup that energy we invest into producing the vehicle while the vehicle's on the road. So that's the base question they're asking with every component. Is the carbon footprint of the whole operation, does that function? It's not about the actual weight, if it's like a ton or 800 kilos, it's about the whole operation from cradle to grave. And working with those guys, we realized how much testing they do. So we basically, halfway through this project of developing a lightweight chair for Audi, we decided to put this chair to public test in Milan. So we hooked it up with a set of quite advanced computers, lots of strain, stress and pressure sensors, and just put that out as a publicly accessible installation. where people could take a place on our chair with a big screen in front of them where they would actually see in real time what their bodies would do to the chair, see all the forces their bodies would put into the chair. We chose a quite amazing location, which was Palazzo Clerici. You see some Tiepolo frescoes up there on the first floor, and we also brought the race car from Le Mans into this palazzo. And this is a little clip which shows you what happens when you publicly test a chair, when you ask thousands of people to take a seat and play around. So this is not only an engineering study where we're trying to understand very precisely what's happening within the structure of the chair, but it's also a study of how do we sit, how do we use objects. At the moment we're busy with evaluating all the data. So as you can see, every person has a very unique impact on the chair. And as we move around on pieces of furniture, we constantly change the forces we put into them. However, a chair needs to be universal. We can't mass customize chairs, because otherwise we would have to walk around with our chair. We would have to take our chair to the restaurant. We would have to bring it here. So it's in a way the opposite, but we're learning from all these individual data sets, and in the end what we get is big data. We get 2,000 people and learn exactly what they do on these chairs. And very briefly, as the last thing I want to show you, our first project for Audi, which was Outrace, on Trafalgar Square in London, where we borrowed some enormous industrial robots and took them on a break, on a city tour to London. Robots are not built to operate under open sky. They live in factories and they don't like being in public places. So we replicated the whole infrastructure necessary to operate robots, and we connected them to the internet. So people were able to send messages to these robots through the internet, and then the robots would play those messages. And playing messages in this case means they would draw the message with big brushes, with light brushes we mounted at the front of the robot arms. And we had a set of 36 cameras surrounding this installation, and each of these cameras would take a long exposure photograph of the robot doing the letter. And then by combining the frames around, from these 36 cameras around the installation, you would get a video that seems to rotate around the installation. It's called bullet view, this, and you all know it from The Matrix, when the camera seems to fly around the object, but really it's a lot of cameras and you combine their frames, and that's the result. So this is the message video every user got sent after using Outrace. And I think my time is up now. Thank you.
Before we get into the discussion, I want to introduce you to Felix Hallwachs. Felix works for a fascinating project which really creates reality. Felix, what are you doing?
So I work for Olafur Eliasson, who is an artist, and I brought a few slides actually in case someone...
Who knows Olafur Eliasson?
Okay, you will have to bear with me through a few slides that introduce him to those who don't know him. And I've been working with Olafur for 7 years, I think, working in his studio. I'm an architect by training, but I've been interested in art and in the production of reality for this time, of course. As Olafur, I would say, is one of the great producers of reality and uses his art to be in the world. And the most recent project we've somehow embarked on, and the one that I'm actually here to show today, is a small solar lamp. We call it Little Sun. It's quite tiny, but we hope it can actually change the world, or at least it can be artistic.
Change the world. It's a task.
It's a task, yes, and we may fail, but we at least hope we will make a small difference on the way. And we're setting our goals as high as we possibly can. I don't know if I can get my my presentation on. Then I can take you through. Yes. Perfect. then I can take you through a little bit of a background of where we're coming from and hopefully take you along to where we would be going. So I see the presentation, but you don't. Now you do. So Olafur is maybe best known in the world for an installation he did at Tate Modern in London in 2003, I believe, which was a very large sun, basically. It was called the Weather Project, and it was very much about producing reality, again, if you will, in London of that summer. And I think altogether 2 million people saw this alteration of the Tate Turbine Hall, which of course is a fantastic space. And it was very much about creating a simple intervention, creating a mirrored ceiling and a semicircle of yellow light on one end of Tate. And that, then when you were looking from below, seemed like a complete sun. And you could say it's a sunrise or a sunset. But whatever it is, people actually started to interact with it very strongly. So Olafur began to believe very strongly in the power that his art has to communicate and to actually produce people's reality. Oh, sorry, no, we went on. And you can see people played games and got mixed up about what a mirror reflection of themselves would be, lying down on the floor and seeing themselves in the ceiling of Tate, reflected and waving down. So they started writing things. And this idea of engagement, this idea of actually using art to communicate, I think has been in Olafur's work since the 90s when he began, and has been continuing. And he has done very large projects. We did a series of waterfalls in New York, under Brooklyn Bridge and along a few piers, where it was very much about creating an urban intervention and making something visible that you otherwise just take for granted, namely in this case East River and the Hudson. And it's very much, again, about the notion that you could see things differently if you actually opened your eyes to it. And of course, for Olafur, I think, and for us joining him in that venture, it's very much about the potential that art has to allow for exactly that, that we can see our world with slightly different eyes, and we can hopefully make a difference, actually. And Olafur would even argue that by being in the world, you always make a difference. You don't just always realize that. So this is a work which was in an exhibition in Martin Gropiusbau in Berlin, in a museum. And it's basically just very simple. There are 6 small spotlights sitting on the floor at the back of the space, pointing at the opposing wall. And they have different colors. And they're just sitting next to each other. So when you walk in between the spotlights and the wall, you create a number of different shadows of yourself in the different colors and in different mixes of the colors. So essentially, when you move, you create the artwork. When you see it, you see the artwork. When you enter the space at different times, you create different parts of this work. And Olafur, I think, and I would join him in the argument, would say that you can understand through art that by being in the world and by participating, you are actually always making a difference. The world is not as set as we think it is. And through art, you can create a language to expose that and expose the potential that everybody has to actually change the world, hopefully. The works we've been doing in the past years have ranged from very small to museum exhibitions to things like this, which is a rooftop addition to a museum in Denmark. And it's a space that you can actually walk in. It's a colored glass ring, if you will. And you can walk through it and you will see the city through different colors as you walk. Depending on how quickly you walk, your eyes will be adapting to the colors that you see as a very simple neurological reaction. Basically, depending on the speed you walk, you will see a different color than the person who has entered after you or before you. And if you run very quickly, you may even see white, but you would have to be really quick for that. And so again, it's about creating engagement and possibilities to understand what you see and how you see in very different scales and very different media. And the color idea has also found its way into museums. This is from an exhibition in Sao Paulo, in an absolutely great Lina Bobadi building, actually, a center for social activity called a CESC. Anyway, that's a side story. But the same can be applied, if you will, to an actual building construction and a space in a museum. And this idea of spatial engagement in many different ways has brought us to develop the project Little Sun, which I'm here to talk about. This project was actually shown, and thank you for that, for the first time officially at DLD in Munich in January. And at the time, we were proposing an idea. And now we have come a lot closer to making that idea reality. And so we see DLD as a great producer of reality for us. And the DLD network has been incredibly supportive, and I will ask for your support later on, too. And so what we're working on, essentially, is a small lamp. It's solar-powered, And it's a little small device which has a solar panel on one side. The sun goes in. There's a battery inside that stores energy. In the evening, light will go out. It doesn't look like a lot of light here, but in rural Africa, in a place where there is no electrical light, this actually works, and it will allow you to read, study, work. Basically, with the input of sunlight of a day, you get one evening's worth of energy. So it's kind of like a micro power station. It's a power station that you can hold in your hand and that you have with you. And we see quite a real demand and need for that. And of course, we have an idea that using art to change the world in minuscule steps like small power stations for as many people as possible would be grand. Going on, so this is an idea, of course, that it has a very real impact. We're trying to replace kerosene lanterns in rural Africa, for example, or rural Bangladesh or rural India. And kerosene lamps account for a great deal of contamination, both in the environment, in your lungs. Sitting next to a kerosene lamp and studying for these two kids, for example, would mean the equivalent of smoking about 40 cigarettes in one day. And our little lamp is offering a valuable proposition to change that, basically costing less than the kerosene you would need. This lamp would ideally find its way into really being a business model that can be applied in rural communities. So we're working on, right now, creating a retail structure that will bring us out to rural areas in the world where energy is actually not accessible and where energy is needed. And on the other hand, we're working on you could maybe call it a campaign in the in-grid world, which could be the Western world, could be the Eastern world, but anyway, with everyone who has internet access, to sell the lamps for a little bit more money there so we can actually generate the profits we need to make it possible for us to go all the way to the so-called last mile and generate businesses where people can actually make money in the end of it. So this is an idea not about charity, but about beauty. It's about creating something that people would want to have, want to engage with, and that we actually happily wear around our neck, even here at DLD. And it worked quite well. We went to Addis Abeba. Oh, this is a bit skewed. So it's actually around the lamp, but anyway. And in the center of that image on your right hand is the Nigerian energy minister, the lady in the fantastic gown. And there's actually real interest and real need to do things like this and projects like this, and not understand them as a Western aid principle to Africa, but understand them as something that will really generate business and, in that way, change the world not only from our perspective, but actually from within. And this is Berhanu and his little sister studying, and we're hoping that with a little lamp like this, his little sister can actually go to school, which currently she can't do because the family is working so hard to even pay Berhanu's tuition fee and pay for the little bit of kerosene that is needed for him to study as well. And this was a very short version. I can tell you a lot more about this, but you already noticed you'll have to stop me at some point.
Yes.
We would love your support in this.
I really recommend to talk to Felix. Of this little lamp, of this little piece of plastic and the solar thing. If Africa can go to school because finally they are poisoned by kerosene, by whatever, and due to this, I think we should support it. We heavily should support it. How much costs this?
We're just setting the price. It'll depend a bit on taxes, but in the West, approximately 20 euros for an artwork by Olafur. That's basically a giveaway. And we're hoping to make it available for about $11 in off-grid areas. And you can understand that's a challenge, so we'll be working heavily to go through all networks and media to make it very popular to have this artwork in the Western world. Sorry? Oh, sorry. So again, the Western world sales price will be around 20 euros, depending on location. When off-grid rural areas, we're targeting $11, because that's a competitive price to about 3 months' worth of kerosene use. So it's a realistic sales option. This is actually something people can afford around the globe. We'll just take a little bit more of your money and my money and use that to generate a business model in off-grid areas.
Bravo, Felix. I think we should also support it. And we heard Clemens, who really makes a difference in his design. We heard Felix, who is changing the world with his work. And now we will hear Johannes. Johannes is a long-time DLD friend also. Your first DLD participation was, I think, 6 years ago.
Yes,
and
hi, Steffi.
He always had to do with art. He always brought fantastic, together with Hans-Ulrich Obrist, our big friend Hans Ulrich. He is not here, unfortunately, but Johannes is here. What did you brought us today?
Thanks for inviting me, Steffi, first of all, and thanks to Marcel, who I think was here before and participated that. And what I brought today is, when you have time, later there's a show, an exhibition, which shows also a little bit the idea what DLD art is, which I would like to briefly introduce, as an overall umbrella for the activity what we show here. It's a show called Ways Beyond the Internet, which basically highlights like artists born after thinking in conceptual art and born after 1980 and trying to bridge digital culture and conceptual art thinking. And we would love to invite you to have a look at the show later during a break, and please ask us for a question. I think Steffi knows as well as I know, because we had this show already in Munich, and I think that shows a point which I would like to point out. It's very typical about DLD Arts activity. It's sustainable thinking. So in a way, yeah, I think it is. Basically, it's the idea of showing arts and other formats in an interdisciplinary way, as DLD is like about arts, design, science and life science, and digital culture, of course. So what we always try to do, and I want to again highlight Hans Ulrich's incredible commitment for the last years, which is between you, Marcel, and I think also I helped. An incredible driver to bring amazing people to DLD. For example, here we see a slide of Yoko Ono, that was in January at DLD, and what Hans Ulrich did there is he brought together Yoko Ono and an astrophysician called Dimitar Saselov, who works about the idea of super Earth. And this match, I think, is very unique, and it fosters, in a way, or addresses the idea of interdisciplinarity and sustainability. So I think that is...
We love to connect unexpected artists, unexpected ideas, unexpected speakers. So
yeah, and
you talk about this, we love to do.
Yeah, and also the idea, I think, of alternative thinking and creating links which usually don't, in the first place, fit together. So I think that's very important over the years, that a lot of artists, like, for example, Wolfgang Tillmans and Dimitar Saselov, met and kind of created new projects and interdisciplinary gatherings. Also, Clemens, you met quite a lot of people through that activity, which you love. And so, yeah, that's an example. And in 2012, we had Focus on Arts and Sustainability, which is also a focus on the Olympics 2016 in Rio, Brazil. And one project we just saw was Felix project. Sorry, I bring it up again, but I think it's nice. These are photographs from Addis Ababa with local artists and photographers. That's this little sun at work, with like in function, how it can help improving life. And this is Oliver talking at DLD. So another project is a year before was called Maps for the 21st Century. So this is a map. So what we did is we invited a lot of artists and designers thinking about reality-based, data-generated reality based on mapping. And so what we did, we produced also maps with different kind of artists like Ed Ruscha. This is Aaron Coblin. That's a flight pattern, which you can see in YouTube. So we produced this kind of maps. Who's the head of the Google Creative Lab, but also an artist. So this bridge exactly is, I think, very unique at DLD. This is a map from an artist from Los Angeles called Pei White. Yeah, and so coming back to your question, Steffi, this is what we brought today, Ways Beyond the Internet. It's an exhibition with 8 artists from Los Angeles, London, New York,
very
and
young
Berlin.
Artists.
Born
very
exactly
young, under 30.
Born after 1980, so kind of growing up with the internet as a cultural condition. And there is a term, Karen Archie, who's she's a writer and a curator in the panel. So we tried to bridge a curator together with digital artists. She coined that post-internet, and that would mean like art and the fashion of internet. That would mean like after the internet, or the internet is down. It means like basically having grown up with the internet, understanding the internet as a cultural condition and trying to work from it with no difference between reality and actually scripted reality. And so these are the guys. You see they're really very young. This is Ed Fornielis, and Cosmas Keller is Ed Fornielis on the left side, London-based artist who did an interesting project you can see outside where he hacked into 30 accounts of American college students' Facebook accounts. So basically when you open the artwork, his work is hacking into your Facebook browser. So you can see that there.
So don't do it.
Yeah, well, you can do it. It's not threatening your identity in the web. Then the other guys are Cosmas Keller, kind of... and it's interesting how DLD could help them really getting more, like finding their place in the world. And the other guy is Oliver Lerick. So basically, you can see this is in a way the bridge of the idea, the old idea of art as in a way a vision for the future.
Yeah.
Art as basically connected to the idea of archival thinking and, you know, the whole museum, which you will probably talk about. I think idea, but connected to digital culture and digital image production, and basically information society. And yeah, so that is called post-internet, as I mentioned. And this is a work from Corey Archangel, video-based. That goes in different formats. So that goes in either in space, like on screens, or in the internet, or it's browser-based. Or it can also be here again in space. That's like with a mirror installation by Raphael Rosenthal, Dutch-Brazilian artist. And that can also go, of course, on cell phone, mobile devices.
It's a wonderful application.
Yeah, yeah, it's his website. His website is newraphael.com. Raphael Rosenthal. You can ask anytime, like Steffi or me, afterwards. So basically that's it, I think. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Johannes. It's just a short glimpse on the art and inspiration pattern of DLD, and I hope you will check out the screens next. It's in this room, isn't it? In the next room, and and don't hesitate to ask. And I really recommend to get to know more about the Russian art world. I just been yesterday in the Moscow, in the Modern Art Museum of Moscow. I can recommend it. Amazing works. I wish I would have known before. Otherwise, I would have invited Russian media artists, and next time I will. So now we have the pleasure to listen to Bernd Lintermann. Bernd Lintermann works very closely with Peter Weibel, who, for example, was the curator of the Moscow Biennale last year. Unfortunately, he cannot come, he is ill, so we send him our best regards to Karlsruhe. Bernd, you work for ZKM. How long?
Since 15 years now.
Since 15 years. For 15 years, the internet started. So what are you doing at the ZKM, and what is the ZKM?
The ZKM is the shortcut for Center and for Art and Media. It's located in Karlsruhe, South Germany, and it was funded in '86 with the goal to combine media and art, to promote it, to show it to the public, and also to further develop the application of media in the cultural context.
And so what is your work?
I'm the head of the Institute for Visual Media there. So the ZKM is in a big building. It houses several museums. The ZKM has 14,000 square meters exhibition space, and per year it has 180,000 to 250,000 visitors. And there are around 18 exhibitions per year. But what is unique about the ZKM is that it has also research and development departments. There are two big departments, which are the Institute for Music and Acoustics, and the other one is the Institute for Visual Media. So we are helping artists, media artists, to realize their works, plus we're creating on demand for certain exhibitions, for example, our own works. We're creating our own technology and offering also this technology to artists. We're creating technology which they cannot buy on the market. So actually I'm waiting for my presentation, therefore I'm talking a little bit longer.
Paul Miller, do you know ZKM? How do you know it?
I
Do you like ZKM? Why?
I'm saying Europe has a very long tradition of supporting the arts, and in the U.S. we don't. So there's kind of the U.S. has kind of an economic Darwinism approach to art, and Europe has a little bit more of a public sphere for that. And ZCAMs and art electronic are very prominent at pushing design and thinking about how the literature and the aesthetics come together. I always tend to find that Germany is one of the more progressive cultures in Europe for public art.
You don't know about Russia. Who is here from Russia? And who knows ZKM in Russia? Look at this. Nobody. Bernd, you have a task.
Nobody, yes.
There's something to do.
The ZKM is...
To get your slideshow going.
Yeah. Even so, the ZKM is more well known in over the world than in Germany. In Germany, only a few people know the ZKM, but we're supporting and exporting exhibitions all over the world, from America, South America, Japan, China. And
What
so
about
on.
Russia?
Russia, I must say, the only export I know about is Peter Weibel,
Peter Weibel,
who
okay.
curated the Moscow Biennial. So, my background actually is in. We can check if the image is there. My background is I started with actually game development with the C64. Wrote software about modeling of plants. Some of you might know Xrock, which is plant modeling software sold by Greenworks, my company. So I also once did do a startup, which is used for modeling the plants in Avatar and Alice in Wonderland and so on. So it's a procedural modeling system. And since 15 years, I'm working in the field of art production. Yes, now it's there. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I'm working in the field of art production. So I think I skipped the theoretical part. So basically, we see the digital media as an extension of our sensory. We can see more, we can hear more, we can listen to more things with the digital equipment. And actually in the history of making graphics, let's say making graphics, there's a paradigm shift. In the 60s, computers were big and static. They couldn't move. And the bigger the computer were, this means more computation power, the better the quality was. So consequently, with the thinking of think big, the paradigm for creating the perfect externalization of our mind with the digital media was the immersive environment with the holodeck, Star Trek holodeck as the final vision. But in the 90s, the internet appeared, and the internet is just about providing data. So on the consumer side, the task was to interpret this data. So nowadays, the question is not more how can you create a perfect illusion, but how can you create a very personalized view on the data which you are accessing over the internet. So, and what I want to do with the next slides is show you some examples. So this actually is a last-minute development from the last Monday. So here's the QR code. You can scan the QR code with your usual code reader. And I was interested in giving the QR code an additional functionality. So it's socially accepted. It's out in the world. And if you view this QR code, the same thing, I could show you, I have it here, I could show it to you here. You see the same content, a video, as augmented reality video floating on top of the QR code. So this is an example of using the same data but viewing it in different ways, viewing it in personalized ways. So next. So cloud browsing is an interactive installation which accesses internet data within an immersive environment. It's made with the panorama technology we developed at the Institute for Visual Media, and it works as the user is surrounded by hundreds of images, each of which is referring to a specific Wikipedia article. When the user selects an image, he has an iPod in his hand. When the user selects one image, the corresponding Wikipedia article appears on the screen, and in parallel a search on Yahoo is started, which searches for related articles on Wikipedia. So the system in the background examines the Wikipedia pages, extracts images, takes care for correct legal restrictions for showing these images, and then displays these images as visual links to the articles. So it's a visual recommendation system which allows you to explore the knowledge base, Wikipedia, in a very intuitive fashion. And of course, you can also see big images, panoramic images, for example, unfolded in the panoramic screen. Oops. Sorry. So, Globorama is an earlier approach to marry the internet with a full surround 360-degree projection environment, and it's basically a very early implementation of Google Earth within a panorama screen. It's from 2007, and we started it before Google appeared with Google Maps.
I really can recommend to go to this Google booth in the next room and check where you live. You can stand from in the midst of Google Earth and find your house. Try to.
So the images which are retrieved from the internet in real time, 8,000 by 1,000 pixel resolution, are transformed via shaders in a special manner, so that you are getting a very interesting but readable displaying of the image in the screen. You navigate by means of an infrared laser pointer. There's still Time Brother is a piece by the Wooster Group, which is a world-known performance or theater group, in fact, which is very famous for their very democratic structures. And in this piece, they created a theater play for a 360 surround environment, where in the middle, in the center of the screen, is a chair which can be rotated. So one person does sit on
Clemens. It's a chair for Clemens.
So one person is sitting on the chair and shifting a window over the screen. You see it on the left side, where everything is in focus, and everything outside is out of focus. So this is a clear externalization of the principle of our perception. We have a very tight field where we can see things clearly and sharp, and everything else is not out of focus, but let's say unsharp. We can detect movements and so on. And this peripheral vision gives you hints on if something interesting is going on behind you or there. So, and the user is arranging his own theater play out of the bits and pieces of theater plays which are going around him. So there are several actors playing in total 8 different pieces which are in content connected, and the user is then making his personal direction of this. So, configuring the cave is one icon for a immersive projection environment. And we did in the year 1997, Jeffrey Shaw, Agnes Hegedus and I, an installation for this. So this is front projection, left, right, bottom projection in 3D. You're wearing glasses, see everything around you in 3D. And we used a wooden puppet as the user interface for letting the user shape 7 virtual environments which he's surrounded with. The human is the puppet is a reduced human, and the idea behind it, of course, is that the human is shaping his environment. So he's creating the world which is around him. So he is creating reality. So actually I make now the jump. Actually it is a jump because it's another paradigm to the mobile devices. So one paradigm for mobile devices is augmented reality, which is since some years hyped. So actually the history of augmented reality reaches back since 50 years. So Morten Heilig patented the head-mounted display in 1960. And just recently, the technology became so cheap that you can target the mass market with it. And Peter Weibel with Jens Barth, a programmer at the ZKM, created an augmented reality application which refers to mass political mass murders, genocide, war, and so on. Traffic is an installation, also an augmented reality installation, which we created for an exhibition in the last year, celebrating the 125th anniversary of the car. The user is holding an iPad on top of the exhibition space. There is a floating and very metabolistic organic representation of the Baden-Württemberg, state of Baden-Württemberg traffic net. So you see highways, you see smaller streets, and we got kindly from Navtec, from a daughter from Navtec, access to their minutely updated traffic data. So what you see on the top is really a minutely accurate representation. So on virtual threads hanging down are cylinders. So on top you have a map, and at certain locations hanging down cylinders with photographic with panoramic photographs from these locations, and moving in these cylinders with your iPad, you can transfer yourself into the location of where the photo has been made, and all the locations, of course, are chosen for their relevance to the history of car. So, ist nur noch zwei. So at the moment, also at the Martin-Gropius-Bau in Berlin, there's an exhibition going on where you hold an iPad on top of a paper and you see an augmented reality video report dealing with the same topic. And one German boulevard newspaper, the Bild-Zeitung, currently supports this by daily updating the paper plus the content.
Convergence of media.
Convergence of media. So, and noch zweites, das vorletzte. And just now at the ZKM there's an exhibition going on where there was a problem on how do you exhibit in a museum sound. So the curators wanted to show a database, and actually I thought about this a while, and then came to the conclusion that in an exhibition, objects need a physical presence. So we ended up with having a large corridor of 30 meters with augmented reality markers, each 50 centimeter left and right. The user is wearing an iPad, and once he focuses one of the markers, he sees a sound column, which is actually a 3D representation of the sound waveform. So he can follow up the sound sculpture. So he can simply walk around it and see it from all sides. And by this trick, every sound piece is having a location. So lastly, I want to do one advertising, and that is in 2 days there's the premiere of a music theater piece by the German stage designer Evelyn Riberschek. So she conceived a cross-genre piece which combines music, theater, mobile game, and interactive installation. So near the main station of Munich, there is a bunker, so a real bunker, it's in use, a bunker where she lets in, for the next 6 weeks, one person each hour. So the person goes in, the door is locked, he's getting an iPhone, and then he can explore a stage which she designed. And the stage consists, or manufactured within the stage, there are augmented reality markers, like you see here, so in posters or as a wooden frame construction on tiles, and you can explore a story behind the physical setup. So, thank you for the attention.
Thank you, Bernd. Did I promise too much? Has something to do with reality curation. Are there some audience questions? Stefan Gutzeit, you should ask, you always ask some questions. Go ahead.
Express my admiration for Felix Hallwachs.
A little bit louder.
A big kudos to Felix Hallwachs. You explained beautifully how art can facilitate innovation, social innovation, and other kinds of innovation. Have you ever worked on art facilitating innovation in medicine?
We have worked a little bit with a Charité in Berlin, where there's a center for, they call it neuroaesthetics. And it's analyzing a little bit the relationship between cognitive activity and neurology. So we have investigated that path, but we realize we're not really scientists. So we rely on relationships with scientists to understand a little bit more how that could have an effect. We do know, of course, on a very basic scientific level that all of his works have a relationship to the body, and I think there is actually a change. And this, of course, is very low-tech. I mean, so it's a very, very simple and very practical way of addressing how art could be in the world.
I think scientists are probably much harder still than engineers for artists to work with because they are even further away from realizing things, doing things. I'd love to talk to you more about bringing together science and art.
That would be a pleasure. Thank you.
Good. So I think we in a time hurry, and I really encourage you to ask many more questions to the participants when we are left this room. They are fascinating people, fascinating friends, and I had a lot of great conversations, and I really want you to have these conversations as well. Thank you.